We're moving on in our agenda now to the 2016 budget overview and discussion. Mr. Giuliano?
Bernie, what'd you do?
Nice job.
Nothing to enhance one's confidence.
Yeah, not a clear room.
I thought they were here for the hearing.
Well, we all knew that those students would be a tough act to follow. And it is that time of year. We've been discussing the 2015-2016 budget. Tonight is the evening that we have an opportunity for public hearing on the budget. But before moving into that segment, let's go over some of the highlights, if the clicker works. Okay, we've got technical difficulties here.
Can we put a new
Yes,
clicker in the
please.
budget?
I don't know, you need that.
You don't
AV
mind,
guy, like when I
Mrs.
was in high
Warren?
school, there was always some kid that was an AV guy.
Batteries?
The arrow.
It's frozen up.
Maybe this is a sign.
Okay, thank you. I hope it's not a sign. I don't know what it would be a sign of, Mr. Simmons. But at any rate, let's begin with some of the district facts. And I go over some of these from time to time. I think it bears repeating in some instances to really put into focus how to compare the school district and the kind of operation that we have here. So if we begin, one of the things I like to talk about is how the district is also a business and the important facts associated with it. We are ranked as the 28th largest district in the state of New Jersey with over 9 million, that's 9 million instructional hours last year. We're the largest employer in East Brunswick. And when we look at our population and compare the borough of Milltown, Spotswood, South River, we are, as a school district population, students and staff, almost 10,500 in all of our schools and buildings. That makes up roughly 1/4 to 1/5 of the total population of the township of East Brunswick. Just to put into perspective what kind of size of an operation we have and the breadth of the responsibility here. We operate a major transit system. We have 550 routes, roughly. Over the course of the year, we run approximately 2.75 million miles, and when we count the number of passengers on our buses from day to day, morning and afternoon, if we were to look at them as individual passengers, we'd be looking at approximately 2.5 million passengers. Some statistics that I'd gathered a while back regarding Disney World in Florida, which operates through its bus system 280 routes and approximately 1.8 million passengers on those. As a major food service provider, I use some of the restaurants that we know here in town. Carrabba's was approximately 115,000 meals served. Red Lobster, 168,000, and Olive Garden, approximately 195,000 meals served annually. East Brunswick Schools has served over 540,000 meals as of March 31st of this year. And that's in comparison to last year, where we served for the entire year about 502,000 meals.
To what do we attribute the increase?
An improved food service program.
I knew you were going to say that.
Thanks for the setup. In terms of our buildings, we are responsible for maintaining 1,425,000 square foot of facilities among our schools and administration building. In comparison to some other buildings, the Brunswick Square Mall pales at 769,000 square feet, and we're about the same size as the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And something that might be a closer relevance to the community is the Freehold Raceway Mall at 1.6 million square feet. In terms of our land mass, 218 acres, in comparison to some of the other examples we show, Disney's Animal Kingdom being one at 500 acres. We've heard many times discussions, what do we do to save money? What are the comments that we've heard over the years? And there was a time when there was much to do, and we've made many efforts. There still is more to do, but we are constantly keeping our eye on what can we do to stretch the dollar, to put it back into the classroom, to be more efficient. We utilize an energy program in district to monitor our energy usage and look for ways to be able to conserve energy. And on that topic, at the last board meeting, the board approved doing an energy audit throughout the entire district to look at ways that we can further conserve energy by implementing cost-saving measures by utilizing more energy-efficient devices throughout our buildings. We participate in numerous cooperative purchasing agreements with other districts throughout the state. As a matter of fact, at the next board meeting, there'll be a number of resolutions, I think there are about 5, reaffirming participation in those cooperative agreements with various entities and school districts around the state of New Jersey and even into Pennsylvania. We provide our in-house transportation services, which has been a great improvement to transportation in the district, not only in terms of efficiency, but also in terms of establishing relationships with the students and with the parents throughout the community. And that 3-tiered busing system is a highly efficient system. It allows us to maintain a high efficiency factor that the State Department of Education monitors for every school district in the state. We work with the Middlesex Educational Regional Services Commission for various programs, whether they are special education needs, professional development, purchasing consortia. We utilize them in many ways to help support what we do in providing services to our students. We work with the township over the years in providing means for programs and for debt funding at lower interest rates. We've worked with the County of Middlesex in paving projects, and we've also utilized whatever opportunities exist to refinance debt so that we could bring in a lower cost of interest and save the taxpayers' funds. And on that particular note, I want to make the board aware that we're currently in the process of analyzing the debt because we believe that there is an opportunity to further reduce some of that cost. And I hope in the next month or so, we'll be able to bring a recommendation that will bring some refinancing and lower some of those expenses.
So, Mr. Juliana, do you have to seek this refinancing information from various lending institutions, or do they?
Well, the lending institutions don't volunteer that information because they're happy receiving whatever the interest rate happens to be. And notwithstanding the fact that interest rates are extremely low,
Right.
and we have very low rates on our existing revolving debt, there's further opportunity there.
So, I mean, is it a matter of research that we have to do?
We do the
to find
research.
that? Okay.
We look at price points to see where it makes sense. We work with our financial advisors to determine whether we meet some of the banking criteria that has to be met in order to pursue the the refinancing opportunities. But it appears that there may be some now. So we're doing the analysis, and we will be coming back.
I just kind of wondered if it was like all those credit card requests that you get in the mail, you know, I'm giving you better rates, but I guess you guys actually have to work for it.
We have to work for it, but that's what we get paid for. So,
Indeed,
and we are the stewards of the taxpayers' money.
that's right.
But Mrs. Shaw, he does get a free pencil sharpener.
The district has often been said to be a consumer of revenue, and that is the nature of a public school district. However, we also look at opportunities where we can be a revenue producer to help offset the needs of the school district, and we do so through our community programs, enterprise. We provide to the community an early morning program. We have an after-school kids program. We have an encore program for after-school students at Hammersholt and Churchill. We have an early learning academy, and we provide services for preparation for SAT, PSAT, and the ACT tests. We provide summer camp opportunities for students in the community. We provide elementary enrichment programs, elementary and Hammersholt school fun and fitness programs. And one of our revenue sources is through the EB PAC, which is on high demand for independent outside organizations to utilize for competitions and other events. We have always been proud of the fact that we are an all-blue ribbon school district, every one of our facilities, every one of our schools. It's been quoted that East Brunswick High School is without a doubt one of the finest schools in the nation. We have many, many juniors and seniors inducted into the National Honor Society each year. The high school has been recognized as New Jersey Model School for the Arts, and we have numerous and almost innumerable significant student athlete and arts accomplishments from one year to the next. Some things to be very, very proud of as a school district. So with those facts, let's talk about the budget. Our budget for this coming year is comprised of revenues and must be balanced with its expenses. The revenues listed, the largest portion of which is our local tax levy at $119.5 million. State aid coming in at number 2 in terms of funding sources at $17.8 million. And I won't go through all of the details here, but you can see them for yourselves as far as how our revenue side is comprised. I will note, as a follow-up to the previous couple of slides, that in terms of community programs as being a revenue producer for the district, the Community Programs Enterprise will be infusing $400,000 into the budget for next year to help support our programs and services. Our total estimated budget is currently at $143.2 million, and our budget is in balance. Our state aid history, this is one of the pieces I like to point to, and Beth, if you don't mind, one more click on that, please. You know, we sometimes lose sight of, and I don't want to ever lose sight of the fact that several years back, we sustained a significant harm in terms of our reduction of state aid, and I think it's always important to keep that in the forefront of our minds. I keep it in the forefront of my mind every day. $20 million is where we were back in 2008, 2009. That was our state aid revenue, and in one fell swoop, we were reduced to $13.8 million. It was catastrophic for us. Since then, our state aid has gone back up to about $17.6 million, and you'll see over the course of 4 years, it really hasn't changed. We've been relatively flat. And when we look at what costs are from year to year, that flat actually becomes a negative. Because in order to sustain the rising costs, that cost ends up having to be borne by the local taxpayer. And that's an important note for the community to understand.
You're missing 9, 10, and 11, 12. Are they similar?
It was more of the same in terms of where our revenues were. We did jump from 20 million and we had a substantial cut. I purposely left those out because it was just becoming, this list was becoming too long. but it was a substantive cut, as you can see.
I'm going to jump in here. Catastrophic? How catastrophic?
How catastrophic?
Give us maybe
Well,
one
at
or
that
two
time,
examples.
I can tell you exactly a couple of the highlights or lowlights of what actually took place at that point in time. We lost nearly 100 staff members, and we lost our world-class foreign language program at the elementary school.
And we still haven't recovered from that.
No, and
No.
frankly, I don't know that we will.
And then we got a charter school right after the cut.
We had a charter school that was implemented right around the same time,
time.
which was concurrent with that cut, as a
It's the
matter
same
of
year.
fact, and resulted in, at this point in time, roughly a $2.5 million appropriation out of our budget.
We knew then we would not look quite like we did. And we didn't. I mean, lose 100 staff, you don't look the same.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So when we look at our overall picture in terms of our state aid from year to year, as I discussed on the previous slide, is the same, $17.8 million. There's no change. Our charter school expenditures are roughly the same at $2.3 million. The SDA assessment remains approximately the same, and I've explained in the past what that assessment is for, and briefly, it is a chargeback to school districts that have received facilities grants to make facilities improvements out of the School Development Authority. But because the School Development Authority several years ago was not well managed in terms of its finances, the results of that bad financial management was that additional bonds had to be sold to help sustain the programs that were being funded in the state, and in turn, school districts have been assessed for the interest costs of that additional financing. Kind of a long explanation, but we receive money in one hand and it gets taken away somewhat with the other. Mrs. Shaw?
So, is that SDA assessment forever, or is it limited to a certain number of years after you've received money for your building programs?
They've never told us.
And
I
they're probably not
suspect-
really sure.
I suspect that it would probably be for the term that the state will be repaying that debt, that additional debt that had to be taken to correct the mistakes that it had made.
Which could actually be a
20 years.
significant period of time.
We're probably about 4 or 5 years into this at this point, so.
Because as I recall, when we had some of our building programs that were still in the development stage, we were basically promised that the state would pay for, I think it was something like 40% of it.
40% of the state's determined number to do the work. Now, that brings in a whole other
Okay.
series of computations,
Right.
because the reality is, while the state may have set a square footage cost for doing new construction or renovations, that cost was not reality, because the market cost was actually substantially larger than what the state had determined to be the cost.
But, you know,
the
nonetheless,
sta-
that was kind of how it was presented to the public, is that, you know, we've got to go for these building programs right now while the state is still offering the 40%.
Well, and absolutely.
And then this is what they do to us.
Well, but.
For a
but-
period of maybe 20 years.
True, but let's put on scale the SDA assessment against how we benefited as a district. And just in the last year alone, 2 years alone, we've had, I think, if I'm not mistaken, $2-3 million in state funding coming into the district for facilities programs that we've implemented.
And are those the ROD grants?
Those are the ROD grants, exactly. So while there is this cost that comes back to have to repay on the fiscal management at the state level, it's a relatively cheap amount to pay for the benefit that we've gained, because the dollars that we've seen overall We received substantial
But
funding
the
for
ROD grants
Hammersholt.
themselves, though, don't come out of the SDA, correct? So
Yes,
it's.
they-
but we're-
yes.
Oh, they do?
They do. They're one and the same.
Okay.
They're processed through the Department of Education and then funded through the SDA.
But why are the two linked? Like, why couldn't you have gotten a ROD grant and have that nothing to do with the,
Well, because this was from a snapshot in time when there were financial issues in terms of how the SDA was operating. And keep in mind that at that time, it wasn't called the SDA, it had a different name that they changed since so that they kind of left that legacy behind. Mrs. Becker, you look like you have a question.
Yeah, but I want to make sure, are any more questions on, because I want to go back to another slide. Any more questions on this slide?
So if I can just summarize on this, and then we can go to that, if you don't mind?
Okay, I was going to wait to the end, but everybody's jumping in, so
It's
I want
fine.
to jump in.
This is an important
Go for
discussion
it.
to have.
Go for it.
So bottom line, on our net state aid, when we take out those adjustments that affect how much money we're receiving from the state, our bottom line net state aid comes out to about $15.1 million. And in debt service, which is the fund by which we pay our mortgages, our state aid is the same. That's based on a fixed amount that was borrowed at the time, so there's no reason for this to fluctuate. We knew what this amount would be back when that debt was incurred. That's at about $420,000 per year. So effectively, we're looking at a roughly $35,000 overall decrease as a result of all of these factors. Mrs. Becker?
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Could we just go back to that slide that showed what you call the balanced budget?
Yes.
The revenues, expenses?
Right there.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Over the years, I've heard you refer to the budget with a very interesting phrase that it's a living document. And my question is that there are things that we kind of need to use a crystal ball for that's sometimes very faulty. I use the example of weather because it's so fresh in our minds. Last year at this time when we were approving the budget for the school year, we had no idea what kind of winter it was going to be, and we budgeted X amount for things like heating, snow removal, etc. What do we do when we get hit with a winter like this, and the amounts that we budgeted for quickly becomes apparent that they're not going to be sufficient to get through? What takes place with that balanced but living, breathing budget?
Well, let's talk about the living, breathing part. We begin developing a budget almost a year in advance.
Right.
Our process starts in August for the budget that's going to take effect July 1 of the next year.
Right.
And there's a lot of work that goes into that, in meetings and discussions and trying to anticipate needs, looking at programs, how programs might change, what are the curricular needs in terms of staff, in terms of materials, new textbooks that may be implemented during the course of the year. So all of that needs to be considered. Then we have a budget to work from. But the reality is that as the year progresses, there may be issues that arise that have to be addressed. And we don't have an opportunity to go back to the taxpayers or to go into a secret fund which doesn't exist to find resources to help support those kinds of expenses that may have been unanticipated.
That's why I asked the question.
And so what we have to do is we have to look back into the budget and perhaps reprioritize some issues, some items. If we do that, it's always going to be in a way that we're not going to affect students and instruction. Even with the anomalies that we've seen with weather, so far we've not had to do anything that has required.
I just use that as an example of something that we estimate going a year and a half away
Right.
out.
But we would have to look within the budget for opportunities that perhaps we can defer, or there were some cost savings that we were able to enjoy that were not anticipated, and reallocate those funds from within.
Because the other thing, besides the weather, the other example that readily came to my mind was we can budget obviously based on the number of kids enrolled in our district. We have enrollment projections. We also have historical precedent in that a certain percentage of children will move into the district during the summer after a budget has already been. But again, that's something that even the East Brunswick Board of Ed can't control. If there is a much larger number of students moved into the district after the budget has been approved, that could be a significant amount. Same thing with, there are still children who are going to be classified after the budget is passed. And again, we can base it on historically how many kids, are classified, will be classified, have been classified in the past. But there could be quite a difference. There could be a lot more.
It very well could, and using the example that you just cited with regard to what our classifications may be for out-of-district placements, we don't have the opportunity to have any kind of a buffer there. The state requires that we budget exactly the number of positions, the number of slots that are necessary, and so up through the tentative adoption on the budget, we're constantly looking at what our out-of-district placements are. We work with Special Education Department very closely, and so by the time the budget comes to the board, that's based on the number of students that we actually have going out and taking away those students that we know will age out for the next year. So we're talking about a very precise count in terms of those placements. So anything new that comes along, we have to deal with from within the budget. Now, how does that happen? It happens because we have students moving in and out of the district. So while we're dealing with a precise number, we have students that leave that may not, that will take those services to another district where they'll pay for them. We also have instances where we bring students back into district, and early on in this calendar year, we had Mrs. Weber-Olashkevich talking about the special ed budget and how we've returned students back into the district. And that's always been a focus, in trying to do that as much as possible. So that's also helped us over the years.
So again, what you're saying is if the state requires us to pass a budget based on the actual number of children enrolled in the special education program, and we have an influx of children after that budget's been approved, the state doesn't provide any kind of a mechanism or process to deal with the added expense.
No.
We need to find it internally.
Yes, that is correct.
Just one little addendum to that. How often does the state provide extraordinary aid for students that cost over a certain threshold?
The extraordinary aid process happens annually, and
So it's
we
just
have
once
an
a year.
estimate in the budget for what that extraordinary aid may be, and we estimate that at about $500,000. So that's already taken into consideration. It could be more, it could be less. It depends on.
But if the circumstances that Mrs. Becker is talking about were to actually develop, where you had, an influx of students that might require a large amount in tuition or what have you, you wouldn't be able to go to the state and say, hey, look what happened.
No.
Can you help us out?
If those students' costs exceeded the thresholds established as extraordinary, we would make application, which we're currently in the process of doing and completing for the current year, but we would make application for state funding under extraordinary circumstances. And that's great, because we would be approved for it, without a doubt. That's happened over the years. The reality, though, is that the pie for extraordinary aid is limited. And so the more school districts that are applying for that pie, the more pieces that have to be chopped up into. And while we might qualify for a certain dollar threshold, we'll get a percentage of that based on what the total number of applications are that qualify. So it's one of those things that we can apply, and wait and see, but we never know what that number's going to be until the state has analyzed all the applications
I see.
and determined how much money is actually available to be divvied up among all the requesters.
Okay, thank you.
Your opportunities for short and long-term debt opportunities will not affect this budget?
Opportunities in what way?
Refinancing for long-term debt, long and short-term debt, the opportunities you mentioned before of lower interest
If
rates?
anything, they'll provide an advantage during the course of the year that we'll be able to see some savings and look at how those savings might be able to be utilized to help support our programs.
So we're going to budget a number moving forward, and if it gets benefit better, we get to put it back in our budget?
Yes.
Thank you.
And if it's not utilized, it'll roll over into the next year and then carry forward as that debt continues to be paid off, but it'll be paid off at a lesser amount.
You know that's my best
I know you love that,
presentation. I love this.
You love
Longer-term
debt.
Debt, yeah.
or at least the analysis of debt. Okay, any other questions on this, or can we move on?
Yes. You said the reality is, so feeding off of Mrs. Shaw's addendum and some of the thoughts from Mrs. Becker, my reality is, as I travel down Old Bridge Turnpike, I see that there are 400 apartments that are just about ready to be inhabited. So that's 400 units. Let's throw in another 200 for that second bedroom, and another 50, round numbers, for the third bedroom. So we're talking about 650 possible human being units. And if some of the things that Mrs. Shaw and Mrs. Becker come into play become reality, then we don't have any money for that.
I think
Total speculation.
I think the bigger issue that we will need to face, depending on how many students come in, and they could be from a variety of grade levels, so we
Yes.
don't know, but it's going to be the space in our schools.
Right.
For the schools that service, where that construction's currently taking place. That's, if they're elementary school students, that will have a huge impact.
I understand that, and I think when we look at our, the report on the dynamics of the community, it has dwindled a bit, so I'm not so much worried about the numbers of kids, although if I'm a parent with kids in that school, I'm gonna be worried, but I'm talking about the dollars and cents for the special needs. Will that fall under the category of some type of,
Relief? I can tell you that there's no special relief that comes for those kinds of expenses if they're not meeting the extraordinary aid threshold. During the course of the year, unless we have some catastrophic issue that takes place, and even in that case, we still have to look to the budget first. Remember, one of the things that we have is we have a mandatory surplus that we maintain. It's a 2% surplus of our operating budget. But we're prohibited from touching that. We can't touch that surplus. It's a rainy day fund, but we cannot touch it without first exhausting every opportunity in the budget for reallocation of funds to address whatever that catastrophic issue might be. And then, only after receiving Department of Education approval, can we actually utilize the funds. So, we always have to look inside first to address whatever issues there may be. In terms of an influx of students, if that were to occur, and I don't think we'd see 250 students coming in all at once, but if whatever students, and we can never predict with precise numbers exactly what the enrollment is going to be, but if a school was going to be affected in a way that enrollment had increased, we're going to find a way to address that from within. We did that in the last 2 years. where we added sections at the elementary level because it was necessary, and the board approved the additional staff that were needed, and we found a way to be able to save from within to be able to address those positions. So unless we're talking about having to hire 50 staff, which isn't going to be the case, if we're talking about having to hire an unanticipated 3 or 4 staff, our district will allow us to do it, just because of the size of the district that we are.
I know you just used as an example, sections that we had in our elementary schools. We're lucky we had those extra classrooms in those schools. Aren't we kind of running out of space?
Yes, we are.
I was actually wondering if Dr. Valesky might be able to shed a little light on that, because his previous school district apparently had like phenomenal growth within a very short period of time.
Yeah, over a 10-year span, they had a 259% growth. It was actually the fastest growing school district on the Eastern Seaboard at one time. So, but we don't have that kind of condition here. But we are reaching the physical capacity of almost all of our 11 buildings. We know where we have sections we're going to grow, and the reality is that we're having to move specials programs and services into hallways because we don't have classrooms to provide those services.
I was going to
And
say, back there
that
again.
we are
that's-
back there again. And,
Didn't take long.
you know, the Building and Grounds Committee of the board continues to look at, you know, longer and intermediate term solutions about how we expand space and how we accomplish things in the building, but that's going to take time. And it's not going to meet the immediate need that we're going to see from the influx of, as Mr. McAvoy said, the apartments as they open up. The only good thing that I know is the apartments are going to be phased. They're not, the COs will not be issued all at one time, so there'll be some anticipation of what that will bring us. But it's going to be an issue.
To follow Mr. McAvoy's point, adding teachers is one thing, but there's also a transportation cost to that also. We'll be facing not only teachers, but a higher transportation cost for that area, wouldn't we?
That's true. That's true. And that's something we can't determine until we actually know where those students fall. So if they're elementary, if they're middle school, junior high, or high school, that's what will help us to determine. But until we actually know where they are, we have no way to be able to give you information that says, here's what those numbers will be. I don't know how many routes that would amount to.
Right.
It may amount to just a few, if we have capacity to be able to support it, depending on how many students are coming from that area. But if we don't have capacity, then we have to add for that.
Thank you.
So, 2 thoughts. One, just going back to the thing about the state or slush fund or extra surplus money. First of all, I'm not a big defender of the state all the time, but I don't think it's unreasonable that they have you look at your budget and exhaust all opportunities to cut back in areas that have been budgeted for before you go to that fund. I don't think that's unreasonable. We also paid for a demographic study, which did take into consideration where the expected growth was going to be, or loss in population areas, and accounted for the apartments that were approved for building
Yes.
at that time.
Yes.
And from that, made estimates of where the needs were going to be. And we formed a strategic planning committee that's going to be looking at the next 3 to 5 years, taking that data into consideration and seeing if we need to make any alterations in building size, where kids go to elementary school. All of that needs to be looked at. So I don't think it's that we're not anticipating the potential for the need to make changes. It's not gonna, it shouldn't, if planned properly, hit us with any extraordinary change at any one time.
Right, I agree. The one piece, and you're right in referring to the demographic study, because it did give us data. The one piece that a demographic study can't tell us about are going to be those transitional students. And when I use transitional, I mean those students that are moving into district from another location. A demographic study will look at the birth rate and how those students
Right.
will move through the system. But as a predictor to say, we're going to receive 100 students, I'm just pulling that number out of the air, but 100 students will move in from another district, another country, and this is the impact, that's where it gets a little bit dicey. And that's where we've seen a large influx of students coming in through the move-ins rather than the aging up.
Well, but there is some element of predicting that because they tell you exactly how many kids per single-family home versus apartments versus townhomes. It looked at the turnover traditionally here in East Brunswick, so there was some estimate on that number. It's not ignored entirely.
But we've seen a much higher number
Exactly.
impacting
Okay,
us,
okay.
higher than was anticipated. So the factors have been off in terms of what that has resulted in for us.
That's why I called it a kind of faulty crystal ball. We need to do long-term guesstimating predictions. But that's why I also referred to your phrase of the budget as a living, breathing document, because we can't control that human element. We have our charts, we have our facts, we have our figures, but we don't know what the family makeup of any of the families moving into those 400 apartments is going to consist of. Will it be one child? Will one apartment have 7 children and a few apartments not have any? How many homes are gonna close? Houses that have been on the market for months could all of a sudden close in June and July, as we found, because people want to get settled before school. We can't possibly predict every element of that, so that was,
No, you can't. It's inexact. We
yeah,
Right.
understand
it's
that.
always in, and that's why I always like that phrase of
Just-
living.
Just one clarification, if I could. We mentioned about the apartments, but certainly the configuration of the apartment will determine what the kind of families, or whether they're singles or they're upwardly mobile people, come into those. But I think we have done a great job historically of providing very appropriate educational spaces and providing a great level of service to all of our students. And that goes to the great work of the board and the administration that make that happen. So we will continue to adjust appropriately as we see incremental changes.
Very important statement, because we've talked about all of these factors that could have an impact on the district, but it's been probably 2 or 3 years since the board has heard me come up here and say, I have concerns. You remember, I wouldn't hesitate in doing that in the past, and would let you know when there were concerns in terms of finances. We're in a good place. We're able to do a lot of things for students. So, can we do more? There's always opportunities to do more. It's kind of a district that we are. But we're not in a position to say that, we're really worried about being able to, make ends meet. We're not in that position at all.
Okay.
So, moving forward to where we left off. Yes, gonna need a couple, there we go. Is there one more on that, Beth? There we go, perfect, thank you. So, our budget summary. So we are estimating our budget at this point at $143.2 million. And I say estimated because there will be some adjustments to that, and I'll talk about those in a few moments. Our general fund tax increase is at $3 million, and our debt service fund tax increase is at $700,000.
To what do we attribute that?
The general fund?
No, the debt
The
service.
debt service?
Uh-huh.
The debt service tax increase is due to how the debt gets paid over time. And so there are fluctuations in the principal and interest payments
It's
that
not just the
occur.
rule of sevens?
No.
No.
So, and I was looking at some data, and I'll probably bring this for the next meeting when we do the final adoption. But there's a chart that actually shows what's happening with the debt. And I know Mr. Philipchak would be really interested in that.
That's my best meeting.
So our net tax increase is at $3.7 million, which equates to 3.99% over the current year's tax levies. That percentage is, of course, is being impacted by the debt service. And just as an FYI, debt service, I believe in the next fiscal year, the 16-17 fiscal year, will actually go down again. So that's a fluctuating number. Mr. Simmons, you look like you had a question on that.
Nope, that was it, you answered
Okay.
it.
Okay, so moving on.
So that includes the 2% cap?
Yes, and the utilization of some banked cap to help cover what our expenditures are. So, our budget highlights, what are we supporting? We're supporting our instructional programs, first and foremost, in both regular education and special education. Curriculum improvements through the acquisition of new textbooks to replace old textbooks and bring us up to date. And investment in technology, as we have continued to do, and this shows a slightly increased amount in technology as we had done in the current fiscal year. We have a provision for capital improvements through lease purchase agreements, as we have been doing from year to year, to ensure that we always are doing something in the way of capital. And so let's now go into the specifics on staffing. This budget includes following staff: general education preschool teacher and preschool instructional assistant for a new section that's required. An additional science teacher for 8th grade at Churchill. An additional science teacher for 9th grade at Churchill. This is due to class size needs. We had reduced positions there, but now we have to add positions back. And that's one of the things to keep in mind, is that it's never static. Our positions will increase or decrease depending upon what the needs happen to be. A health teacher at Churchill. We are opening a new LLD special education classroom at Hammersholt, which will require 1 teacher and 1 instructional assistant to support that class. There's a new BD program, special education program, at the elementary level. The school has not been identified yet as to where that will be housed, but there is a new section required, which needs 1 teacher and 1 instructional assistant. There's
BD is behavioral
disabilities. Yes. Multiply disabled is MD. That special education class section will be added at the high school, and that's to address the students that are moving up from the junior high. We have a resource room teacher that needs to be added at Hammersholt, and then we have an autism program class that will be added at Churchill. Again, this is to support those students that are moving up from the middle school into the junior high school, and that will require 1 teacher and 1 instructional assistant. At Irwin, we have a lunch aide that will be added to help support the students during the lunch periods. We have a human resources coordinator to help assist with all of the state and federal mandates that are required of human resources. There is an addition of a head coach for golf, and that's actually a transitional position from what is currently in place. Our clerical substitutes have not had a rate increase in many years, and so this year the budget includes a rate increase to keep us competitive, so we can actually attract folks to come in and work in our substitute clerical group when they're needed. And as a result of what we've done with the kindergarten classroom teachers in terms of the staff, we're going to be able to eliminate some of the regular education elementary instructional assistants that were necessary because of the class sizes. And I'm sorry, that wasn't for kindergarten, that was actually for some of the upper grades in the elementary schools. A couple of the changes that will also be coming, and we discussed these recently, we have a coach for gymnastics that the board had discussed, was recommended. We'll be seeing an adjustment for an additional position there by the time the final budget is voted on for the board. We have 2 elementary teachers that we'll be adding into the budget due to sections. We're seeing our class sizes growing a bit, so we need to make some adjustment for those. And we also have discussed with the board the need to add security officer. And so we're going to be doing that as well. That will be reflected in the budget. To help offset that, our continuing negotiations with our health benefit provider have so far yielded us funds to be able to help offset these costs, I think, in a major way. I haven't come to the bottom line yet, but it will be much better than just some small potatoes. And we continue to work with our health benefit provider to try and bring the rates down, but we're moving in the right direction. Mrs. Becker.
So, to take everything that we've been saying tonight, the finance department, the board finance committee, the superintendent, the full board, over the years have developed enough internal processes and approaches to dealing with the unexpected, and we're doing a real good job of it. And that it's never at the expense of the instructional programs for the students or the staff, that we manage as things develop and we really stay on top of things.
I think that's an adequate summarization.
Is that it?
And
there any
budget
other comments
information
on the-
is available for the public, and it has been. District website, the Office of the Business Administrator, and the public library. And the next important date is next week, May 7th, which the meeting will be held at the East Brunswick Performing Arts Center at Hammersholt, where the board will adopt the final budget for the 2015-2016 school year. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank this year's finance committee for all your hard work.
Following that discussion on the budget, I'd like to open an opportunity to the public to comment on the 2015-2016 district budget. Is there anyone that has a comment or a question?
Good evening, everyone. My name's Dana Zimbicki. I'm a resident of 506 Riders Lane and also the president of the East Brunswick Education Association. When I'm listening to the budget, there's a couple things that I'm thinking about. And one of them is the $2.3 million that we're spending to the Hatikva Charter School. And I'm looking at how it affects my children personally, and also looking long-term. So here's a little synopsis. I have 2 children in the district, one an 8th grader, one a 12th grader. Both of them have had the benefit of having foreign language education in the elementary school. I'm thankful for that. I feel sorry for 7th grade students and under. Because of state funding cuts, because of the Hatikva Charter School, they are not going to have that benefit. And that benefit has been incredible for my senior this year. He's going to Penn State University, and because of the amount of foreign language education he's had, he went through the entire, no more classes left, made it through, he's taking medical Spanish right now. He is going to only have to take 2 classes at Penn State University to achieve his minor in Spanish. That's pretty impressive that our district offers that. And I'm very thankful that my 8th grader will probably be afforded the same opportunity. 7th graders and below are not going to receive that opportunity. They're not going to be able to make it through the full level of foreign language. So that's something I just want the public to think about, because as you know, or as the public should know, the Hatikva Charter School expansion was granted in March, April, for 6th through 8th grade. And East Brunswick is charged as a single community charter school. So we bear the incredible brunt of this cost. Besides, and that's my personal story as a parent, but now also as the president of the Education Association, many staff were cut back when all of this started, along with the state funding. I know the number was 100. I don't know what percentage of that 100 had to do with the Hatikva Charter School. But education has changed since then, too. Education today has become so much more student-directed. Where the students are working, it requires so much more attention, which I would think smaller class sizes would be the best situation for that. And when we're cutting staff, or staff cut from that cost, that does not, that's not a positive effect for our students here. So I guess my ultimate message is, seeing the budget, there was many things in the budget. I'm very impressed with the budget. I'm very happy with a lot of the items in the budget. But the one thing that I just can't get over is that we are still spending $2.3 million for a charter school, a charter that was created, and the definition of a charter, created for districts where there's a need. There is not a need in East Brunswick for a charter school. That is absolutely clear. And we're spending $2.3 million. And that was for this expansion. Who knows what's going to happen next year? So I guess my message is, I think as residents of East Brunswick, we need to be very vigilant and not allow what just happened a month ago to happen again next year. So that's my message, and I welcome anybody who would like to have further conversation to contact me, and we will continue that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.